So coming up this weekend is going to be Bellator Champions Series Belfast, and it's going to be taking place in Northern Ireland. I believe this is one of the first events that Bellator has hosted after being acquired by the PFL. And I think this Bellator Champions Series is something new. I'm not entirely sure what it actually means. If you know what it means, let me know in the comments below. And another thing as well is the USA broadcaster still hasn't quite been confirmed. Ariel Helwani did actually announce though, and he did say that Bellator was going to announce someone new potentially on Tuesday or Wednesday. So keep your eye out for that if you are in the USA and you want a way to watch this fight card here, because it is a pretty good one. You know, there's a couple of title fights on here. There's a few well-known fighters that have fought for the title before. Of course, Patricio Pitbull's on the card. Corey Anderson is on the card. There's a lot of really good up-and-coming prospects that Bellator is trying to build on the card as well. So yeah, it's going to be a good one. I did write an article about this one a couple of nights ago by the time this video does come out on the We Want Picks premium membership service, where I write an article every single week, and you get access to that for $10 per month, but you can get a 3-day free trial by signing up using my code ARTEM. And you get access to a lot of stuff. Angelo from We Want Picks Bets, Jacob from We Want Picks Bets, articles from other channels as well as DraftKings, and everything else. There's a lot going on for $10 per month, but if you don't want to pay $10 just to have a look at what it looks like, you can get a free trial and you can cancel during that 3-day free trial. So with all of that being said, let's get into my predictions for this card. So at the moment, the first prelim is going to be at light heavyweight between Luke Trainer and Grant Neal, and it's kind of an interesting move for Grant Neal as he's going to be fighting at 205 pounds after fighting at 185 in the past. And Luke Trainer is not a small guy to make your 205 pound debut at Bellator in, because Luke Trainer is 6'6" with an 81-inch reach, and he is a very big dude for the weight class. He's very dangerous as well. He's got very, very good grappling, decent wrestling to get it down there, and he does use his range pretty well when the fight is on the feet. Grant Neal, for the most part, is a striker, but he can wrestle, and he is very strong in the clinch, and he does rip the body very well. So maybe that's something that he'll be able to use against Trainer, as of course, being 6'6", he's going to have a pretty long body that he's going to be able to kind of struggle to guard throughout the whole fight. Grant Neal was coming off some really good wins. To be fair, he beat Ramiro Cotton in his last matchup, and Cotton's a very good wrestler, a very good prospect, even though he is a little bit older for someone that is a prospect. He beat Albrechtsen, who I think is actually a really good fighter, and unfortunately hasn't had that much success in Bellator, and before that, he beat Christian Edwards, who was another one of Bellator's really hyped up prospects that just didn't quite end up working out. Trainer is coming off his own win over a hyped up prospect. He managed to beat Sullivan Corley, a guy who had pulled off a couple upsets, was knocking everybody out. Trainer just took him down and submitted him in the first, and he kind of did something similar to every single win that he's managed to get in Bellator. Not many of Luke Trainer's fights go very far, most of them in the first round, and Grant Neal's going to be a really hard guy to get out of there in the first round. But I do like the way that Luke Trainer fights, especially against a significantly smaller opponent here in Grant Neal, as he wasn't really the biggest middleweight. I didn't think that he looked massive against Ramiro Cotton, for example, even though Cotton is a smaller guy as well. He's coming up to 205 pounds. I do like Trainer in the matchup. He is going to be significantly bigger. He uses his length well. He uses his size well. He's a decent grappler. Now, Neal's going to be a tough guy to submit because he's a good wrestler himself. Neal might even defend some takedowns by Trainer, but I do think Trainer gets it done, and Trainer is the underdog here. Plus 120 on Bet Online right now, and Grant Neal is minus 150, so I'm going to be starting off the card with an underdog. Word is that Stephen Hill versus Jordan Newman has been cancelled. I'm not too sure why, but if the fight is still going on, the pick for that fight is Jordan Newman. But I have heard from the reliable source that that fight is no longer happening. So I'm just going to quickly move on to the next one at heavyweight. Abraham Babley is going to be taking on Isaiah Pinson. And this is a hard fight to pick. And I think I'm going with a pretty big underdog here because I am picking Isaiah Pinson. And if I look at the odds, Isaiah Pinson is plus 155 and Babley's minus 185. So the odds aren't actually that wide. Abraham Babley is not big for this weight class. You see 5'10", and you would kind of expect a guy that is 5'10" to either be quite large like Chris Barnett is, or just like really, really built and just massive at 5'10", but he's not really. He's just kind of, I mean, he's a big guy. He's 245 pounds at that height, but he's really fast for the weight class, and I feel like he uses his speed pretty well on the feet. For the most part, he is a striker. I do think he is going to be the better striker in this matchup here. And he can wrestle, but for the most part, he's just trying to knock you out on the feet and use his speed to just kind of be faster than a lot of the other heavyweights that he takes on that are just slow and big. Isaiah Pinson is also not really the biggest heavyweight as well. He's 6'2" with a 71-inch reach, but he's got pretty good cardio, and on the feet, he's very high volume. I was pretty impressed by his performance against this guy. Must have been Vitor Resende, I think. It must have been Vitor Resende, who he fought for Bellator, for PFL. It was one of them. In one of the fights, he throws a lot of volume. I think it's like almost 200 strikes in that fight, which is kind of crazy for a pace at heavyweight. He's a boxer for the most part, but he can wrestle, and his cardio is good. He's shown to me that I think he's got better cardio than Abraham Babley, and he can clinch, and I think he can push a pace. If Isaiah Pinson comes in here trying to make the fight really boring, I think he beats Babley. And the way by that, I mean, English is a hard language. The way that I mean by that doesn't make sense either. What I mean is, Pinson, to make it boring, he's going to have to clinch up against Babley and take him down and just kind of lay and prey on him, grind up against him on the cage, really wear him out, because Babley I have seen slow down before when the fight does get long. I think Pinson, he's got the cardio, he's got the wrestling. I think that he's going to be able to use those to get past the dangerous striker, the fast striker in Abraham Babley. So give me Pinson to win here. He's not very highly picked at all on Tapology. He is the underdog again. So 2 underdogs to kick off Bellator. Pretty interesting, I guess, because underdogs are very hard to find in Bellator events, to be fair. But I'm definitely not going to be going with a dog in this one here. Nathan Kelly is taking on Vikas, Singh, Ruhil. I'm pretty confident Nathan Kelly is going to be able to get this one done and get it done by submission. He's just the much better grappler in this matchup. Much better grappler than Vikas Singh. And he's fought much better competition than Vikas. He's coming off a win over a 6-3 opponent. Before that, 4-3, 8-4, 4-1, and 8-1. And on the regional scene, he was taking on some pretty good guys as well. He's a guy that PFL must think that he's going to become a pretty big name, because he headlined that last PFL card that he was on against Dimitri Salames. And there was some pretty big name fighters on that card that were underneath him. Vikas Singh has fought for PFL before. I actually know his manager, and I have talked to his manager quite a bit about MMA in India, so I do feel kind of bad picking against him, but I just don't think that Vikas Singh is the level of Nathan Kelly. I think he gets submitted in the first round. He got dominated by James Gonzalez, who's a decent wrestler in his PFL fight, and before that, he was just fighting guys not very often, 4 years ago, on the regional scene in India for MFN. I think Kelly gets it down. I think Kelly gets a submission in round number 1. He's minus 800. That's really kind of all I guess you need to know. I've got a very good feeling that Nathan Kelly gets it done and gets it done early. Ciaran Clarke is another very good prospect that Bellator is trying to build up. And I think he does get it done against Darius Mafi. Now, Ciaran Clarke is a guy that I do think that is someone to maybe just keep your eye out for, because I think eventually there is going to be a potential to pick a big underdog to beat Ciaran Clarke, as I do think he's got some flaws, and he has struggled with lesser opponents in the past, but even then he still has fought some pretty decent fighters throughout his career. He's missed weight a couple times, but he's beaten a 5-3 opponent, 11-5 an opponent, 6-3, and then also when he first came into Bellator, he was fighting some pretty good guys. For the most part, he's a grappler. He has a very extensive win-loss sort of amateur career, but he's showing it out to be a very good professional. He's taken on Darius Mafi, who is a striker with a very padded 4-1 record. I mean, this guy just has not beaten anyone with a winning record. He did take on Ali Taleb, but Ali Taleb really won that fight quite badly too, actually. Like, he really beat Darius Mafi in that fight. Like, Mafi was not in a good state after that matchup, but Ali Taleb's really good. I'm picking Ciaran Clarke. I'm picking him by submission. Mafi is a striker with a super padded record, 4-1 padded record. I don't think his grappling is as good as Ciaran Clarke's. And once again, Ciaran Clarke is a minus 1,000 favorite, but I would not recommend putting him in anything. Don't put Ciaran Clarke in a parlay at minus 1,000. It's just not worth it. Not even for the risk either, because there's a chance. It's MMA. Mafi could knock him out, but I think Clarke gets him down, and I think he submits him in the first round or the second round. Tafik Masayev was meant to take on Alfie Davis, but this is actually another fight which has been cancelled, except for this one. I do have an opponent for you. Alfie Davis is going to be taking on Oscar Ownsworth, is from what I've been told. So Oscar Ownsworth is stepping in for Tafik Masayev. In the original fight, if it does go ahead, because of course Tapology hasn't updated it, so maybe I've had a bad source, I was picking Masayev to out-wrestle Davis. I think he's the much better wrestler in the fight. But in the matchup for Alfie Davis versus Oscar Ownsworth, I'm going to be picking Alfie Davis. Oscar Ownsworth, he hasn't fought very good competition in his career, and every time he's taken a bit of a step up, he has struggled a little bit. He took on a guy that was 12-6, Lewis Monarch, on PFL Europe #1, and it didn't really work out for him. I don't think he was given another PFL fight because he just barely got by him, but now he's got that opportunity to fight on short notice in Bellator. He's a striker for the most part. He's a long-rangey striker, similar to Alfie Davis, but I think Alfie Davis is just kind of better at what Ownsworth is good at. So I'm going to pick Alfie Davis. I think he gets it done. But if this is the fight, then I pick Masayev. Hopefully that's not too confusing, but Tapology hasn't updated it, and that's just the joy of relying on a website to make my videos. So yeah, Angelo probably won't be too happy with that one, because he does not like people like me that just use Tapology to record the videos. But let's move on. James Gallagher is taking on Leandro Higo. This is a very closely lined fight, which you don't get too much for Bellator. Leandro Higo, I believe, is -125, and Gallagher is like +100. Yeah, that's pretty much what the odds are. I am going to be picking Leandro Higo in this one here. This is a somewhat short notice fight, and I believe Leandro Higo has taken the fight on short notice. Gallagher was actually meant to take on Jeremy Kennedy originally, but then Jeremy Kennedy was given the fight against Pitbull, so then they called up Higo to take on James Gallagher. I think Higo wins. James Gallagher is kind of an interesting fighter to me. He's actually a pretty decent fighter. He's a great grappler. He did lose to Patchy Mix, and ever since he lost to Patchy Mix, I just don't really know what's going on, because he's only fought once since then. Had a pretty unimpressive performance against James Gonzalez, who, despite that record, is actually a pretty decent fighter. I do think that James Gonzalez is probably a lot better than his record does show, but I just don't think that Gallagher is going to be able to get past Higo here. He's a great grappler, as you can see, lots of finishes, but ever since he lost to Patchy Mix, he's kind of been going from gym to gym. It's just kind of hard to know, whereas Higo, he's a Pitbull brother, his nickname literally is Pitbull as well. He's not the most exciting fighter, he's also a grappler, so I'd expect a lot of grappling in this fight. But I think in this one, he's just going to be able to take down Gallagher, who I don't think his takedown defense is that great, and then just control Gallagher. Both of these guys are former bantamweights as well. Gallagher fought at bantamweight and then lost to Mix and then moved up to 145. And Higo's been called up on short notice to make this 145. So I don't think the weight or anything is going to be a problem. I think Higo gets it done. I think he just wins by decision. I don't think this is going to be a very fun fight, especially if Higo does win the way that I think he is, with the top control, with just the control in general on top, and I think he gets it done by decision. So give me Higo in this one here in a pretty uneventful fight, unfortunately. This one should be pretty fun. It's going to be Tim Wilde taking on Manoel Sousa, and there are a lot of people picking Manoel Sousa, but Tim Wilde, he's proved me wrong before. He's definitely getting up there in age. He's almost 37 years old, and he just kind of keeps putting on pretty good performances. He knocked out Mike Hamill, who's a very tough guy, a guy that had only been knocked out once before in his career, and Hamill's a pretty solid wrestler, so that was a great performance there. He beat Chris Gonzalez, and before that he beat Saul Rogers, who was a very good wrestler and actually fought on The Ultimate Fighter quite a few years ago. I believe he is on Michael Bisping's team. Manoel Sousa, I think Manoel Sousa has a real chance at winning this matchup, and a lot of people do, if you look at Tapology. Well, I think Wilde's just better. And I know that's a really bad kind of just analysis and a bad kind of take, but I do think that Wilde should be able to just beat Manoel Sousa at his own game, or at Wilde's game, because Wilde fights pretty well from range with that 74-inch reach, and now he's going to be taking on a pretty small guy for the weight class, the 5'9", 69-inch reach Manoel Sousa. And Sousa's going to try and get scrappy, he's going to try and pressure forward, but I think Wilde is going to be able to keep circling back and keeping him at the range at the end of his punches. Sousa maybe could be trying to take this fight down to the ground. He was actually meant to fight on Dana White's Contender Series at one point, but then ended up getting signed to PFL. I think it was in 2022. I remember there being kind of a weird contractual situation there. So Manoel Sousa is a guy that could have potentially even been in the UFC. He beats a lot of really good guys on the regional scene for SFT who just seems to put out these really good fighters from Brazil. And Mauricio Ruffy as well is actually a guy that's in the UFC right now at 170 pounds. But recently, I feel like he has just been struggling with fighters that are like Tim Wilde, fighters I think that haven't had the experience of Tim Wilde. I think Wilde beats him at Wilde's best game. I think he's going to be able to box from range against Sousa, keep the fight on the feet, make it interesting. So give me Wilde. Give me Tim Wilde here. Actually, Tim Wilde's the favourite. I was talking like he was the underdog. He's minus 120 and Sousa's plus 100. I apologise for that, but the pick is still, of course, Tim Wilde. And now we have Fabian Edwards taking on Aaron Jeffery in the featured fight. And Aaron Jeffery's a really interesting sort of fighter to me because he looked so good in every Bellator fight he's had, except for the fight against John Salter, where he really got found out in the wrestling and the grappling. Jeffery's a dangerous striker. He's actually had multiple Contender Series opportunities where he's lost twice. The first one, he lost to Brendan Allen, who is going to be main eventing a UFC Fight Night somewhat soon. And then the next loss was to Caio Borralho, who has now gone on to be a pretty good top contender at 185 for the UFC. And even before that, he's beaten good guys, you know, like Andre Petroski, a guy in the UFC, Bruno Assis, a guy who maybe will be in the UFC soon because he's been on some pretty good fights and wins recently. He got signed to Bellator, beat Fabio Aguilar, and then he knocked out Austin Vanderford in the first round. And I feel like if he got past Salter, he would have gotten a title shot at Bellator. But Salter in this matchup really exposed Jeffery's wrestling and grappling, man. He was just able to take him down over and over and over again. And Salter's got really good BJJ, so he was just kind of able to hold him down. And Jeffery just couldn't get anything going really on the feet. And that was a bad fight for Jeffery because Salter, that was his retirement fight, you know, and he was coming off some bad losses to Gegard Mousasi. Gegard Mousasi smashed John Salter, and then he lost to Johnny Eblin. And then I thought, you know what, it's going to be Aaron Jeffery next as the good up-and-coming prospect. He loses to Salter, but he rebounds with a very good win over Dalton Roster. Fabian Edwards is Leon Edwards' brother, if you guys didn't know that, and he fights very similarly to Leon Edwards, where he's not the most exciting fighter in the world. He's very patient. He does fight from range very well. He picks his shots, and he can wrestle and grapple offensively if he needs to. We have seen a little bit of wrestling from him recently. I thought he showed pretty good wrestling against Johnny Eblin, even though he did, of course, end up losing that fight. I think Fabian Edwards should be able to get it done, though. He's a very technical striker and a very patient striker. And Jeffery's forward movement and his forward boxing and his pressure and his power might give Fabian Edwards a lot of problems. So that's a good reason to pick Jeffery, and there will be a lot of people that will do that. But if Fabian Edwards, in my opinion, can hold his own on the feet, and I wouldn't be surprised if he sees what has happened to Jeffery in the past and he goes for takedowns, you know? Edwards is a guy that I'm pretty confident is going to go in there with a good game plan. I think he should be able to, even if he's not even winning the striking exchanges on the feet, I think he will, though. I think he's a really good striker, you know. And I think he can wrestle too, which is why I'm going to pick Fabian Edwards in this matchup. I'm picking him by decision. Fabian Edwards is minus 125, and Aaron Jeffery is minus 105 on those betting odds there. And now we can move on to the co-main event. And this one's going to tear a lot of people in half, man, because even I'm not 100% sure on my pick. This is one of my lowest confidence picks on the card because I do believe that Patricio Pitbull is a much better fighter than Jeremy Kennedy. But I also believe that Patricio Pitbull is definitely out of his prime, well out of his prime, and it's definitely maybe even coming towards the end of his career. We're talking about a guy that has had 42 professional fights in MMA, a guy that has defended his title multiple times. He's been a two-weight world champion. He's been in wars before. And then recently, I feel like he did something that, in hindsight, was a bit of a mistake, but at the moment, it was very awesome and very cool. He went from being the champion at 145 pounds and 155, and went to try and get the 135 pound title, and he fought at 135 against Sergio Pettis, and he just looked slow. And he just looked like he couldn't get anything going, and Sergio Pettis was able to just kind of piece him apart, take him down, just kind of able to do whatever he really wanted to. Pitbull, and it was just kind of a sad performance to see because Pitbull looked drained. He looked washed. I'll be honest, he just looked really bad. But it's weird because only a few months before that, he beat Kleber Koike-Obst, who's a really good Ryzen fighter, a very good grappler. He beat Adam Borix, and that's a win that's aged pretty well. And he beat AJ McKee, another win that's aged very well. And then he goes in there at 135 pounds again on short notice and loses to a young up-and-coming prospect in Chihiro Suzuki and gets KO'd. And it's like, man, maybe he's washed, maybe Pitbull's washed, but he's coming back to 145. I think he's better than Kennedy, man. Kennedy's a really good fighter, don't get me wrong. I think he was going to lose to Aaron Pico if Pico didn't get injured. And then he beat Pedro Carvalho, who's decent, better than his record suggests. Much, much better than his record suggests. Has been a very good underdog in the past. But I think Kennedy really could find a lot of success on the feet here. He's a long, rangy guy. He's big. He's 5'11" compared to Pitbull, who's 5'6", but that's nothing new for Pitbull. He's always been the smaller guy. He's fought at 155, where he was much smaller than guys like Michael Chandler, for example. But Pitbull can mix it up. He can wrestle. He can grapple. And I still think he's got it, man. I really do. And I don't know. I feel like there's always a time where there's the right time to fade a fighter. I feel like Alexander Volkanovski versus Topuria is a perfect example. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the time to fade him. But I'm going to pick Pitbull still. I do think I genuinely believe that Pitbull's the much better fighter, and that's why I'm picking him. But maybe he is washed. Maybe he's got nothing left, and we're about to find out. I think he's the much better fighter than Jeremy Kennedy, and that's why I'm going to pick him, though. Best of luck for Kennedy. This is probably his best opportunity to beat Pitbull and become the next big featherweight champion for Bellator, but I'm going to go Pitbull here. He is a slight favorite. He's minus 130, and Jeremy Kennedy is plus 100. So now let's move on to Corey Anderson versus Karl Moore in the main event, the second of two title fights in this one here. It's in Northern Ireland. Karl Moore is from Ireland, so he should be the hometown guy, but I just don't think he's going to get it done against Corey Anderson. I feel like light heavyweight right now is going to be Corey Anderson's division in Bellator. Vadim Nemkov has gone to heavyweight in PFL, to my knowledge, which was a pretty interesting move. That's what he's doing. And now with Vadim Nemkov gone, I just can't really see anyone in Bellator right now that can beat Corey Anderson. I think Corey Anderson is the best wrestler in the division. I think he's a much, much, much better wrestler than Karl Moore. And his striking's pretty good as well. I mean, he beat Phil Davis recently, which was a split decision. Before that, he lost to Vadim Nemkov. But before that fight, he was beating Vadim Nemkov with his wrestling, with his ground and pounds. And he was on his way to winning until unfortunately, the class hedge on the grounds did happen. He's knocked out Ryan Bader before, who is now in the PFL. Karl Moore has been on a pretty good run, though. He's been an underdog, and I believe a lot of his fights that he's recently won. He beat Karl Albrechtsen, who I did say earlier was a fighter that I was pretty high on. He beat Maciej Rozansky. He beat Lee Chadwick, I know it's a split decision, but Chadwick is a guy that's turned away a lot of really good prospects. And he beat Alex Polizzi, and he was the underdog against Polizzi. If I'm not mistaken, that was Polizzi's comeback fight after he lost to Ramiro. That is true. And Polizzi is a good wrestler and a good grappler, and Moore was able to shut him down and be able to take him to a decision and win the decision, of course, using his long, rangy striking. But Anderson's even got a longer reach than him. He's also 6'3". He's a much better wrestler. I just think that Anderson just dominates this fight with his wrestling, and he is one of my more confident picks on the card. Anderson, he's a big favorite. He's minus 375. Moore is plus 310. Moore's a good underdog, though, because he has turned away really good guys in the past. But I do believe Anderson's the best light heavyweight in Bellator right now. I still think that Anderson right now is also definitely like a top 7 heavyweight in the world. Light heavyweight, I should say, sorry. Maybe even a top 5 light heavyweight on the planet. Maybe. Maybe, honestly. I think that Corey Anderson would beat quite a few guys in the UFC. I mean, he was in the UFC, of course, but you guys understand what I mean. I still think Anderson's a top light heavyweight. I think he gets past Karl Moore. I think it's a good matchup for him. Ground and pound is Corey Anderson's game. There's a good chance it goes the distance, as I think he gets it done with the wrestling, but I'm going to go with Anderson to win by TKO. I think he's going to cut apart Karl Moore with a lot of ground and pound elbows. I think he's going to eventually find a finish using that wrestling. So give me Corey Anderson to win the matchup. What did you think of those picks? Let me know in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there any massive underdogs that you like? I'm interested to know, so let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.